Today on NewsWatch, the budget battle in Washington appears to be over, for this year at least. See what lawmakers plan to spend our tax dollars on. Plus,
you see universities adopting harassment codes that merely say that something is harassment if it offends someone.
could we be witnessing the death of free speech on college campuses? We'll break down what's really behind new university policies. And her new book tells the story of God's love for you. I'm sitting down with New York Times bestselling author Sally Lloyd Jones. She's sharing her secrets to success today. Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. By the end of the week, members of Congress are expected to approve a new federal budget. While the new House Speaker says it is the best deal he could get, some conservatives are not happy because Planned Parenthood funding and out-of-control spending will continue. Our Gary Lane has the details.
The budget battle was Paul Ryan's first big test as House Speaker. He put a positive spin on the agreement, saying both parties, Republicans and Democrats, got something they wanted.
I think we played our cards the best we could, given the cards we were given the situation we inherited. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to achieve.
The Republicans got a big energy win. Democrats finally agreed to end the 40-year ban on oil exports.
Do you know what that does for our foreign policy, what that does for job creators, what that does for infrastructure? It's huge. It's permanent policy that's good for American foreign policy, good for energy, good for jobs.
The bill also stops the Internal Revenue Service from targeting conservative groups, like those audited in the recent Tea Party scandal. While Republicans failed to stall Environmental Protection Agency greenhouse gas regulations against power plants, they agreed to extend solar power and wind energy tax credits for another 5 years. The tax compromises are expected to give Congress an incentive to move forward next year with comprehensive tax reform. The 2016 budget also weakens Obamacare by eliminating the so-called Cadillac tax placed on high-value health plans. Democrats agreed because labor unions opposed the tax.
This is a bipartisan compromise. It's a bicameral compromise. And I understand that some people don't like some of the aspects of this, but that is the compromise that we have.
Those people Ryan referred to are House conservatives. What did they want that they didn't get? With a federal deficit nearing $20 trillion, conservatives wanted to see a bill that lowered the deficit. That wasn't included in the budget bill. And despite maintaining pro-life protections guaranteed in the Hyde Amendment, the new budget does not end the ban on funding for Planned Parenthood. With no way to override a veto from President Obama, lawmakers made that decision despite undercover videos that showed the abortion provider discussing the sale of aborted baby body parts. And what about the controversial issue of admitting Syrian refugees into the United States? Ryan said that issue will be brought up by the Senate in early 2016. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Members of the House Oversight Committee are pressing administration officials over the vetting process for foreigners coming into the U.S. They want to know what safeguards are in place to ensure potential terrorists are not exploiting legal paths to enter the country. The FBI says the San Bernardino attackers used private, direct social media messages to discuss jihad and martyrdom as far back as 2013. Lawmakers are working on legislation that would make reviewing someone's social media presence part of the standard vetting process to get a visa to come into the U.S. A Baltimore judge meets with prosecutors and defense attorneys today to discuss a new trial date for a police officer charged with manslaughter. The jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict in the case of William Porter. He is one of 6 officers charged in the death of Freddie Gray. The hung jury followed 3 days of deliberations. Freddie Gray died after suffering a broken neck in a police van while handcuffed and shackled. There have been peaceful protests following this mistrial. A Canadian pastor has been sentenced to life of hard labor in a North Korean prison camp after alleged crimes against the state. North Korea's highest court handed down the sentence against Hyun-soo Lim after a 90-minute trial. Lim is in his early 60s and pastors Light Korean Presbyterian Church in Toronto. Family and friends say he's made more than 100 visits to North Korea, where he supports a nursing home, a nursery, and an orphanage. He was detained last February and charged with trying to use religion to destroy the state. Prosecutors had asked for the death penalty. A big deadline is coming up in California's co-ed bathroom battle. A California law lets transgender students use any public bathrooms and locker rooms they choose. As David Brody shows us, churches are fighting this access and pleading for help.
Right now, California transgender students can enter any bathroom or locker room in the public school system. Opponents need 500,000 signatures to change that law. Those signatures would put a measure on the November ballot, which would require people to only use public facilities in government buildings that match their biological sex.
I've got children and grandchildren, and we've got to make it right for them.
Pastor Jack Hibbs of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, is leading the way, along with churchgoers across the state. But it's an uphill fight. They need those valid signatures in the hands of the Secretary of State by this Monday, December 21st. He believes the church needs to stand up.
The church has got to get smart on how to confront the culture, how to address it lawfully, with the right kind of heart, truth, in love, yes, but by all means, we need to really make a difference by addressing the issues that are really being ramrodded down upon our family and our faith and our values as Americans, as believers in this country.
The group Privacy for All tried to get the ballot measure passed last year, but came up short. Now they hope the recent defeat of Houston's pro-transgender bathroom ordinance will help their effort. Hibbs says the time to be silent is over.
The church has been absent on these issues. The church has been quiet. I don't know if we want to be discovered to be polite or what, but we're losing the culture because we've been silent.
David Brody, CBN News.
Coming up, we're going back to school and seeing how new university policies could make free speech a thing of the past. A Christian college professor has been placed on administrative leave after wearing a headscarf to demonstrate solidarity with Muslims. Larcia Hawkins is an associate professor at Wheaton College. School officials say they placed her on leave after she made comments on social media about Christians and Muslims sharing the same God. Hawkins says she wore the hijab to support Muslims in the country, but the college said it had, quote, no stated position on the wearing of headscarves as a gesture of care and concern. Students are rallying online to defend her and call for her to be reinstated. As strange as it may sound, college students across America are now demanding censorship. They want their schools to limit what they can talk about to protect feelings and create so-called safe spaces on campus. Many universities are giving in to their demands, but as Heather Sells reports, others are standing strong in favor of the First Amendment.
Today's college students want professors and administrators to make them feel safe and protest if they don't. This phone video shows a Yale student publicly cussing and denouncing her dormitory director. This crime encouraging students to make their own decisions about what Halloween outfits to wear. The student wanted the university to make the rules about offensive costumes.
You should step down! It is not about creating an intellectual space! It is not! Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here!
At Yale, the University of Missouri, and elsewhere, students are increasingly concerned about what they consider to be offensive speech. They're calling for more rules to limit what students can say.
There are certain things that are right and wrong, certain things that shouldn't be said about other people depending on what their, minority, racial background, income status is.
In the last 20 years, such sentiment has led more than 400 universities to adopt speech codes. The problem, they consistently violate the First Amendment, shutting down so-called offensive speech or writing in the name of respect. Other rules create free speech zones and what are called safe spaces.
Of course, we want to protect somebody from being actually harassed or intimidated, but merely expressing a view that makes other people uncomfortable is what a university is for.
Censorship is like a cancer that eventually spreads out of control, and eventually everyone has something to worry about.
Here at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, what is called the Respect Compact actually restricts student speech.
This speech code, like many others, calls for a free exchange of thoughts and opinions within a climate of civility and respect. But Professor Mike Adams notes that it gives the university incredible power and the ability to punish anyone it considers disrespectful.
Offensive, disrespectful speech is the only thing that's ever really been protected by the First Amendment, because that's the kind of thing that people might want to go after.
I definitely think it makes students hesitate, and I sometimes hesitate to kind of voice my opposing opinion because I don't want to really upset the rest of the class or even the professor.
It become ingrained in the culture, and then students, sort of wake up one day and say, well, you know what, I do have a right to be safe. I do have a right to be free from speech that might make me feel uncomfortable or disrespected. And then boom, at that point, what do you have? You've got Yale and you've got Mizzou.
FIRE is an organization that tracks speech on campus. Right now, it's following more than 200 universities that have substantially restrictive policies. The typical approach, codes that define harassment broadly, despite a narrow definition from the Supreme Court.
Harassment is severe, pervasive, and so objectively offensive that it effectively denies a student the right to an education. But you see universities adopting harassment codes that merely say that something is harassment if it offends someone. At Drexel University, they had a speech code that said that it is a violation of campus policy to have inappropriately directed laughter.
What's known as the Chicago Statement is beginning to change the trend. It was created here at the University of Chicago, and it holds a high view of the freedom of speech, saying that civility and respect should not curtail the open discussion of ideas.
Professor Jeffrey Stone helped to write this statement earlier this year, and 6 universities have already followed suit. He enjoys support from faculty and administrators, although some students oppose what he's doing.
I think they have been raised to be protected and to be shielded from risk, and that they're therefore much more entitled in terms of feeling that they shouldn't be put into positions that make them uncomfortable.
The diversity movement has also contributed, he says, by encouraging youth to express their concerns. It's a profound change for students to be the ones to argue for limited speech. Historically, it's been administrators or off-campus forces.
The terrifying thing to me is that the current wave of censorship is coming from the students, not from the faculty.
We've always been on the side of the students, and the students have always been supportive in this fight for free speech. But now you have these disinvitations, you have this movement for safe spaces on campus.
This student movement has huge ramifications for the future of universities as we have known them, as well as for those who dare to disagree.
The risk of standing up and saying, no, we have to believe in free speech, the proper response here is not censorship, is that you get labeled a sexist or a racist. And it very quickly winds up on social media. And you can't get rid of that forever.
Christian College President Everett Piper recently stood up, blogging that Oklahoma Wesleyan is not a daycare.
I think I started a bit of a grass fire by simply telling a college community that I want you to learn. I don't want you to feel safe, per se.
This battle between learning and safety may be just beginning. At its core, not just campus policies, but the hearts and minds of a new generation. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Up next, we're heading up to Studio 5 for a conversation with the New York Times best-selling author. Hear how she's working to tell the story of God's love for you. Sally Lloyd Jones is a best-selling children's author. Her writing brings the Bible to life for millions, and even pastors are turning to her children's books to teach adult audiences. The New York Times best-selling author sits down with us today in Studio 5.
Everything was ready. The moment God had been waiting for was here at last. God was coming to help his people, just as he promised in the beginning. But how would he come?
Sally Lloyd Jones is a celebrated author and New York Times bestseller.
I always loved writing as a child, and either that or acting. I either wanted to be an actor or a writer, but I had no idea what kind of writing. It was only later that my nephew was born, and suddenly I had a real child to write for, and that made all the difference, because I stopped thinking about children's books being something out there that you write, and realized, oh no, actually, what would I say to Harry? And it made me just write as I would speak. And I think that's the key. And then from then on, I just loved it. And it kind of appeals to my sense of humor. I think I have I'm a child inside, probably.
That child inside has produced an impressive collection of children's books. They managed to grab the attention of children, even in the age of video games and other gadgets.
I think it falls on us as writers and artists, whoever, in whatever form, to work harder to tell better stories, because our lives are stories. Mm-hmm. Stories are incredibly powerful, and God has designed it that way. Yeah. And we're saved by a story. We're not saved by a rule book. We're saved by an actual, true story of a God who comes to rescue his children. So the power of story, I think that's what we have to work hard at. And once you've caught the child's imagination, then they won't stop. Mm-hmm. But it's about catching their imagination, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. In terms of story, one that you choose often is the Bible.
Yes.
Why the Bible for stories, for you?
Well, I grew up thinking the Bible was I didn't realize it was, I knew they were individual stories, but I thought they were there to tell me how I wasn't doing it right, how I needed to change so God would love me, either through keeping the rules that I wasn't keeping or being brave like Daniel. I remember thinking, but I'm not as brave as Daniel, so I never would be thrown to the lions because I'd have given up. I'd have denied him. So God must not be pleased with me. So that's what I thought the Bible was. And I think most of us think we know what the Bible is, and it's never good, mostly. So I thought, yeah, but the Bible isn't a book of rules and a book of heroes. It's a story. It's one story about how God loves us and comes to rescue us. And because I'd grown up as a child thinking the Bible was like that, thinking God wasn't very pleased with me, even though I knew him from a young age, I still thought he wasn't pleased with me. And my motivation was, how can I tell this incredible story, but tell it in a way that a child can first of all know that God loves them?
Many of Sally's works bring the Bible to life for children. The Jesus Storybook Bible is probably the most popular. And now there's this book, The Story of God's Love for You.
What prompted this book, The Story of God's Love for You? What made you decide to, this isn't a children's book, but what prompted you to write this one?
Well, it started off as a children's book that adults were reading. And I sort of thought, well, the poor children, let them have their own copy, which is the one I wrote first, called the Jesus Storybook Bible. Right. But I kept hearing, grown-ups were reading it, and pastors were reading it and using it with their seminaries. And I'm like, if I'd known that, I would have been so terrified to write it. But it was so wonderful to hear it. And then a friend of mine said, a ministry had contacted us and said, would you ever do an edition that we could give to someone who isn't a Christian, who, maybe a Muslim, maybe Jewish, who would find a barrier in the fact that it would be called Bible or the Jesus Storybook Bible. Those already set up a barrier. And so we thought, and also they were saying, can you do one that's for adults so we could give it to adults? Now, a lot of adults are very able to read children. They love the pictures. But what this book does, by calling it The Story of God's Love for You and having it be in the form of a novel, suddenly we've taken away the barrier to someone who you could give this to anyone and they wouldn't look at you strange. Because if you give them a children's book, what I found is they'll give it to their children. They may not read it, but this is for them. So we wanted to make it so that God's love could come through to anyone. Because I think any good book should take away the barriers to the story. And I feel like this removes the last barriers and hopefully will reach a whole other group of people who desperately need to know that God loves them. And this is the story of how, like you said, the never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love for them.
What do your young readers tell you when they get to talk to Sally?
Oh, they're so sweet. It's the best bosses in all the world I work for. And so they'll come up to me, and often it'll be like a little boy, say, coming up with the Jesus Storybook Bible with this look in his eyes. And they'll say, I love the Bible. And I'm like, what more could you want? Jesus Storybook Bible is not the Bible. It's the story of the Bible in a form that a child can hear that will lead them to the Bible. But when I see them say that, I'm like, my prayer was that they would meet Jesus in the pages of the book, and that's the look on their face. They've met the hero, and that you couldn't ask for more than that. And then occasionally I'll have question and answers with children. And one time, I was born in Africa, so one of the ways I like to break the ice is I don't tell them I was born in Africa. I just say, so can anyone guess where I'm from? And they're so sweet. These are little ones. They'll go, you're from Queens or Louisiana or Kentucky. And I'm like, and then I realized they want you to be from where they're from. One time they weren't getting at all where I was from. I mean, where I was born, that's what I'm asking. So I said, so I'm from England, but where was I born? And then they guessed London. One time these children were not getting it at all, and a teacher just felt like she had to help them. So she said, now children, I'll give you a clue. Sally was born somewhere that's very hot, that has giraffes and lions, she said helpfully. And then this little girl put her hand up. A zoo? The nice thing about working for children is it keeps you humble. You're like, yes, out of Africa. No, a zoo. And then another lovely, my favorite question. We have question and answers sometimes. One time I read this whole book, and at the end, this little girl I said, have anyone got any questions? And she put her hand up and went, I love you. And you were like, oh, okay, could you get a better job than I have? I don't think so. So sweet.
It is indeed sweet. And tonight, you can join a live Twitter chat and Periscope with Sally. CBN News is sitting down with her, and you can join us at 8:30 Eastern Time. Check us out at cbnnews.com and all of our social media connections to participate and to learn the secrets of being a best-selling Christian author. Stay with us. We are coming right back. It's now time for your Thursday Thankfulness. We come so close to the end of another year. This is my prayer of gratitude. Father, I often think of endings as a time to mourn, but I know they too are cause for gratitude. Help me to clearly recognize and accept the end of a season. He has already ordained the end just as much as he ordained the beginning. With that in mind, be sure to make this a thankful Thursday. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd also love to hear from you. Connect with us anytime online. See you right back here tomorrow.